Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Growing Generations podcast show. So, in today's episode, we have a new guest to join us on this live stream. One of the gardeners who I have collaborated in the past before, and he's another fellow podcast host. In this week's live stream, we will be discussing about gardening on YouTube. YouTube is a big platform where many influencers or bloggers or educational sites post videos to discuss everything and about anything. However, there is a little section for us gardeners that discuss about gardening. We discuss about how to do things. We might document our journeys on our YouTube pages. And so many people might have some questions upon growing or just starting a journey on YouTube with their gardens. I started almost 5 years ago. And so it's been a journey, and there is some things we learn along the way because there's not one perfect person. So this week's guest is Enoch Graham from the Urban Gardener channel. He also hosts a podcast called Let's Get Growing. I have been a guest on his show before, a very well executed podcast, and I definitely would recommend you guys to go check him out. His link is in the description. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and enter Enoch.
Hey, how you doing, Emmanuel? Good to see you.
Hi, Doc. Everything's going good over there. How is everything over there?
Going great, going great. We're getting ready to launch our new season of our show. Busy at work, but it's going great. Spring is just ahead for us. I live over here in Southern Oregon, so it's a little bit different of a climate than what you deal with, but we're looking forward to our spring here real shortly. So it's an exciting time of the year.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Here in Southern Florida, on the other hand, we are just starting to die down on all of our crops since it's getting hotter, getting more humid, and we no longer have any cold days. And so, what we're doing at the moment is just setting aside our crops, and at this moment we're just growing anything that can sustain our heat, whether it be like cover crops, fruit trees, because what I do is what you see in the background of this entire show, food forestry, which is better for our climate. And so something we'll be discussing today is gardening on YouTube, since it is
Yeah.
a trending topic, especially since after the pandemic. I have noticed, because I was a gardener on YouTube before the pandemic, that many people joined the garden industry on YouTube and other media platforms. It skyrocketed very quickly. Like,
Hmm.
we had many new gardeners emerging, who wanted to grow their own gardens, especially after the pandemic. And so there could be other gardeners out there who are a little bit hesitant on starting their YouTube channels, or if there's someone wanting to start a YouTube channel on the garden industry. And we're here to give you guys the basic steps on how to successfully or carry a YouTube channel here on the garden industry in general, since gardening is one of those hobbies that it's a very, very, very cool. It's actually one of the best
Hmm.
hobbies out there,
That's
especially
right.
since it's fun. It could be inexpensive. You're using your creativity. There's many things when it comes to gardening. And so
Hmm.
to kick off this episode, the very first question is, how did your gardening journey start?
How did my gardening journey start? Well, that takes me back for me. Well, I've been growing and if, doing like house plants and plants and all that pretty much my whole life. But about 13 years or so ago, a friend of mine gave me a cucumber plant, a little start. And I'd never grown any food or anything before. Everything was indoor and house plants. And so, I just, it started right there with that little cucumber plant. I grew that out that summer on a balcony in an apartment, so I didn't have any space really. So I just used this balcony and luckily it was, plenty of sun. So that cucumber plant thrived and took over my whole balcony. And we were eating cucumbers by, midsummer or so. And I was serving up some to my daughter, and she was just really amazed at the fact that I grew this. It was one of her favorite things ever is cucumbers. So she was eating them. She's like, "These are delicious. And you actually grew those?" And it was just at that moment that everything changed. I mean, it really is. Everything changed. A light bulb hit me and was like, oh wow, there's you a lot more you can get from a passion for plants that I've had for all these years by actually going outside even now and growing food. And that was just a serious change in my life. So, and from there I moved here to Southern Oregon a little while, maybe a year or so later, and got myself just a little bit more space. I'm a renter. I've got just a small patio and all that sort of stuff. So I just really went at it with my gardening passion. And I was just like any other gardener out there too, man. I was buying every seed packet I could find. I was sowing things out of season. I was killing tons of plants. I was just trying everything I could and trying to learn and figure out things. It was just so much fun. And I liked what you listed there with some of those ideas. One of them is also, or a couple of other ones is, really just a great connection with nature was one of them. Got me outdoors more, got my hands in the soil. It really connected me with, the earth and my connection with that. And then the other thing I really found that really, really just locked it in for me was just the amount of de-stressing that a garden can do. I work full time all the time. I've got, other things in my life. We all have all of these just really crazy stressors in our lives. And as I was learning and developing this gardening and these different skills and stuff, what I was finding was like I was getting uplifted. I was like, my personality was changing. I was opening up. I was, what I mean? I was wearing a smile more, which was just really something else. And I think at that point, it was just something I knew that I was just going to do for the rest of my life. I was just, I was hooked and I was in it and I was just going to keep going. And yeah, so, I continue to do that and have continued to grow my skills in our small space urban gardens that I still live in the same place. I'm, 12, 13 years later here, and still growing and still enjoying it, just like more than anything else.
Yeah, I definitely agree, especially since gardening is almost like a therapy session. It is
Hmm.
so calming and relaxing. It's one of the things I do every single time I'm stressed. If I am stressed, I go, you see me outside, working outside, cleaning the garden or doing something because
That's right.
it's a stress reliever. And
Yeah, yeah.
so something I
Pulling
definitely,
weeds, pulling
yes,
weeds. This is it
yeah.
helps so much.
Yes, I definitely agree. It's definitely a cool hobby to have on the side, especially I've seen lots and commonly doctors who have very stressful jobs, they have
Yeah.
gardens because that's how
Yep.
they're able to alleviate stress.
Yep.
And so the other day I actually did a essay on the benefits of having a garden, and that was actually one of the points I covered, which is it's a relaxer. It's super
Yeah.
calm and relaxing hobby to do, and you're able to do it depending on how much time you're able to invest in the garden. So that's the best thing ever. You're able to
Yep.
adjust it to what you're able to provide. And
Yep.
so moving into media side of things, I know when it comes to media, my channel is all about how to. It's a lot of educational videos showcasing them how to grow certain things, etc. It's mainly all channels who are in the garden industry or considered educational videos because we like to teach about gardening. And
Yeah.
so something I realized when it comes to gardening on YouTube, or one of the questions that are asked is it time consuming? Gardening on YouTube,
Mhm.
the main question that's brought up when it comes to, hey, do you want to start a YouTube channel? The very first question they ask you, is it time consuming?
Yes, yes. Well, that's the one thing is it is time consuming. That is very true. Right off the bat, yes, is the simple answer to that. Again, though, too, now for me, again, back in college, like way before I even found that cucumber, I was doing video and photography and doing different things. And then I hadn't done that for a while. And when I was first contemplating doing the channel and everything, it was really kind of more of an idea of like trying to bring back some of those skills that I had from before. And so when I started getting out in the garden and started filming and doing all that, that is definitely one of the things you start realizing is the time that it takes to do things. Because, you know, depending on how you want to shoot your videos too, some people are really just straightforward and they go right on the camera and they can, you know, just say whatever and then they'll post a video and all of that. And I really admire some of those channels. But for me, I was taking more of a creative look at what I was doing. You know, I like the, you know, the real close-ups, the B-roll, the, you know, the time lapses, these sort of ways of just kind of showing, you know, the garden just a little bit more than just a straight shot onto things. And so when you're going to start adding those sort of elements to your videos and things, then it becomes even more time consuming, not just in the filming part, but the editing as well too. But what I also found though is that that's where I found the second part of the enjoyment of doing things, is because I found that sort of creativity. So when I was able to connect with that creativity, it just created an extra element to my gardening. So it's all kind of all one now in some sense. But you know, just really simply, it is time consuming. It's something that you have to think about. And you know, if you're going to be starting a YouTube channel, is how much time do you have to be able to dedicate to your channel and to filming and to actually gardening? Because that's the thing that we're actually doing. We need a garden. And I'll tell you, the one of the things that does happen every now and then is postponing doing something in your garden because you're trying to make sure that you're going to get a good video, or you're going to be able to cover it and you're going to be able to put it onto your channel. And then therefore it could start messing with the schedule a little bit. And that sort of stuff can happen too. But if you could figure out how to manage and do the time management stuff, which is something, I mean, honestly, right in front, I'm still working on today. Years after doing all this stuff, I'm still working on the time management stuff. But if you can really nail that sort of stuff down and really be able to, you know, stay consistent with that, with the time management, then it shouldn't be a problem at all. I mean, you'll find that it'll create a little extra layer of enjoyment to the whole gardening process.
I definitely agree. Gardening on YouTube is very time consuming. Not only are you gonna have to invest time in the garden, but you're gonna have to invest time in your videos. It's
Yep.
really important that you're, especially if you're like an educator online, like us, who we teach how to's. We want to make sure we strive on our videos or have great quality videos that
Hmm.
gives the information we're trying to put in the video, and hopefully that information is effective. And
Yeah.
so one of the things I realized when it comes to videos in general is lots of people love to see results. They love to say, okay, you say this and this, but what do you have to back up that information? And so
Hmm.
it takes not only time consuming, but it also takes a good time to plan. Because
Yeah.
if you have a video in mind that requires some type of result to showcase that your information is valid, you're going to have to plan about a month or two, depending on what you want to film, whether it
Hmm.
be testing out fertilizers, how to grow something, an experiment. Those have to be tested months prior. So you're able to document that throughout that journey and then say, look, this is what I found, this is the outcome, and this is how to do it. And so what I realized is if you don't have lots of visual effects, that could have an effect on the people who are watching your videos because they really
Yeah.
want to see what you're doing.
Hmm.
Um, and so what I definitely agree in is time management. Super important to have time management. And I'm on the same boat as you. I am still trying to figure out time management since I have a lot on my plate right now.
Yeah.
And I just recently went through and thoroughly cleaned my garden, and it looks like it can breathe now. And so
Yeah.
I have to be able to manage all of my things at once in order to have a flowing system
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
everything I have. And so that's definitely I 100% agree on, because if you don't have time, you don't have time to invest in a garden either, let alone a channel, because then
Yeah.
it will decrease and it's going to affect your viewers, let alone.
Yes. One of the things I do suggest, though, if anybody is contemplating starting a YouTube channel and all of that, is to, you know, you're going to have projects or ideas for videos that you want to do, right? And so you're going to be out in the garden, you're going to try to film those, you're going to try to put those specific things together, but always in your, plan, work on things that you're not filming and go out in the garden, spend it time, spend, without the camera, put all that stuff away and do your gardening, enjoy your garden and do all that stuff so that you're also not at the same time stressing yourself out because you're trying to cover everything. I did that for my first couple of years. I was just like, oh, I want to cover everything I'm doing. And then it just became too much, so you gotta also segment time out just for your own personal gardening experience.
I definitely agree with that. It's very time consuming when it comes to gardening in general. And so you have to have a plan.
Yep,
And so it's really important you stick to that plan as well so everything can flow naturally.
that's right.
And so another thing I want to discuss is that podcast shows. Podcast shows are starting to become a trend in our garden industry.
Mhm.
And I know Kevin is Spiritu at Epic Gardening. He has a podcast show.
Yeah,
We both host about a podcast show. It's just been a striving thing that
yeah,
Danny at Grow Up channel has one as well. It's a constant thing that's been striving in
yep,
industry. And some people may be interested in just starting a podcast show on gardening. Probably they have
mhm,
the experience. They don't have the 100% time to release 2 to 3 videos a week or
yeah.
videos a week. And if not, they want to start a podcast show, which is more limited and less time consuming. So if anybody out there is interested in doing a podcast, especially for the garden industry, what are some tips and advice you could give to those who are interested in diving into the podcast industry?
Yeah, well, again, another kind of fun aspect. It's the one of the things I think is kind of kind of coming back to that time management idea is that it's kind of one of those things now that I'm juggling because I've got now my videos and the podcast and the garden. So I think, just as I was starting to get my time management down as I was doing videos and gardening, I add this podcast to it now. So I'm really juggling and everything, but it's really fun. One of the things found the most when I was early on in my channel, I started venturing out from my own garden to go meet other people, other gardeners, other channels, organizations, and different things like that to go do like interview style visit videos where I'm going to go show what they're doing and get information from guests. And what I found when I was out there doing that was just something I really enjoyed. I was like, it's one thing to be talking to the camera and filming a video, editing and putting together this really cool gardening video, but then to, have a conversation with someone else, to bring someone else into the picture, really expands what you're able to accomplish, in as far as getting information out or that sort of thing. And so, really connecting with that there is when I, really decided that I wanted to kind of expand the channel into this, what we call a live cast, though, which is more similar here. We're doing a live stream, we're interacting with our guests and that sort of thing. And then we're releasing it as a podcast for people to listen to later. And again, too, one of the things that people want to think about that too, again, comes down to time management. Can you fit this in? And then you also got to think about, what are do you want to do something with other people? Is, there's plenty of people who are out there who are doing podcasts where it's just them or maybe one other person and they're just doing a podcast and they're talking and doing all that. But if you're going to be bringing other people in like you're doing today with me, and I think we kind of touched on this just a little bit before the show started, was that you're going to have to think about the behind the camera work at that point.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to contact people. You've got to, really do the work and lining things up, especially if you're going to do the live type of podcast that is starting actually to become, even more popular than just podcasts themselves, is that there's a lot of behind the scenes work that has to do with it. And then is how creative do you want to be then too? Again, coming back to doing videos, you could do a straightforward video with you and the camera, no editing really, just, cut the ends off, and send it onto YouTube, or you can add all of this other stuff, and you can try to make the thing more interesting, is what we've kind of done with the Let's Get Growing show that we do. We've got introductions, we've got little video vignettes that we can show throughout the thing. We've got little segments and stuff, and then a couple of different guests. So we're trying to make a show out of it, like a real like television talk show in a way, kind of thing. So if you're going to start getting that creative, then again too, it just starts to become more and more that you got to do. But ultimately, if those are the things that you enjoy, and if it works out and you can find find a kind of a stride in it, and get it going, it's really fun. It's so enjoyable. I just, we did our first year this last year. We had, I think, somewhere between 40 and 50 different guests on throughout the year. We got to talk to so many people. I got to meet so many people and all of that. So in the long run, again, coming back to the time management and what it takes to put into it, it was really worth it, because man, I had so much fun. And what we're looking to do this year, is even expanding. Well, hopefully we'll have even more guests this year and even more to offer throughout the show and do all that sort of stuff. So really in the long run, it really all comes back down to time management and what do you really want to accomplish? What is it you're looking to do? And once you've got that all figured out, and then my best advice at that point is just go do it, have some fun.
Yeah, I definitely agree. When it comes to podcasts, especially when it came to the Growing Generations podcast or the show, I realized that it's really important to have everything set and planned out so you can have a
Mhm.
flowing stream. Um, and it's
Yeah.
really important that you make your guests feel welcome. You also want to make sure that you're able to provide them the information they need in order to have all the information that you may ask for, etc.
Hmm.
And so something I've realized with this show is, once again, you have to set aside some time for you to do your live shows, especially since they're live streaming. they'll
Hmm.
they'll be able to Your viewers will be able to interact with you, and then they'll be uploaded later onto your YouTube channel. And so something I realized when it comes to podcast in general is that you have to have knowledge as well in general
Hmm.
about the topic you're going to discuss about, because you can't really throw out a random topic that you haven't discussed about or
Oh,
haven't experimented on, because then you're going to be relying on your co-host to be doing all the information and you won't have any input for it. So it's just really important that you have a plan set out, you have time management when it comes to your podcast shows, especially on YouTube, since each show varies on viewers, each
mhm.
episode varies on topic. It totally depends on what you would love to have for your show, because
Yeah.
each and every single show is different. Not one you'll see is similar or copied. Everyone does it to what they prefer. And
Hmm.
so it's really important you make it to what you want to make it. And it's really important that you adjust it to how you are. What's your lifestyle? What you like? What time? Everything comes in play when it comes to a show, as well as where you want to stream it. Because YouTube is
Hmm.
not the only place you could stream
Yeah.
an episode. If not, I know you could stream on TikTok, you could stream on Instagram, Facebook,
Yeah.
but I believe that in YouTube is the best platform for live
Hmm.
shows.
Yes.
I also have seen that some gardeners upload their episodes onto Spotify so people could just hear it.
Hmm.
And so who knows if that's something I'll venture in? I don't even know yet. Because
Yeah.
the show is just starting, and so yeah, once again with the Let's Get Growing podcast show or the live cast show, you guys are just starting up, meaning
Yeah.
like you guys for 2024, you guys are
Yeah.
starting your season again. When I was a guest on on your show, it was very cool. I really loved
Mhm.
the effects, the graphics, the thought that was put into your episode to
Yeah.
make it thrive. And I really like how you showcase guests from different platforms as well, because I know you showcase Instagram and YouTube.
Mhm.
And so that's something I really, really like as well. And so once again, every show is different based on the host and the creator of the show.
Yeah.
And so that's just in general for any podcast. It doesn't only have to be gardening. It could be any topic you'd like. or any industry yourself you're fit into. It's just adjusted to who you are in general.
Yes. Yes, and that's right. And your podcast should reflect a bit of your character and who you are and that sort of thing when it comes down to it, and you definitely, when you're talking about getting guests of different from different, I don't know, backgrounds and all that sort of stuff. I think that's one of the fun things that we get and have an opportunity to do is to be able to reach out to a lot of these other folks who are doing things and sharing in different ways, whether, it's a podcast of their own, or I've even had, we've had a few guests who have their own radio shows that go out on the radio, television shows. One of our guests, Nick Federoff, this last year, he's a big television guy in the Los Angeles area and teaches gardening down there. So, and then YouTubers, Instagrammers, TikTokers, all sorts of things, bloggers and other podcasters and all that sort of stuff. And there's just so many people out there doing things in all different ways. And I think that's one of the things I really like to highlight on again, too, on my show is all of these people and just the amazing folks that are out there doing all of this really great stuff in the gardening world to share all of their gardens with us and their knowledge and information, as well as who they are and what their garden stories are. One of the things I like about what we do on our show too is to, whether or not you're watching our show this week or recognize a person that we might have on the show, you come watch the show and you get to meet them and you get to learn about who they are, their background, what's, what about gardening, do they enjoy the most, all those sort of things that gives you a really good idea of who they are so that you can possibly go and check out the content that they're putting out there, and that's again one of the real fun parts of doing everything with the podcast. And you get some people, and I've got enough experience ultimately in my gardening to kind of know and have some sort of knowledge about most things, but for the most part, I really like to dig into what I'm getting from my guest, similar to what you're doing here, talking about YouTube gardening and that sort of thing here with me, as I'll have other guests on there and I'll want to know and kind of dig into what they're teaching people, what they're showing people, what are those important things that they think that needs to be known or learned, those sort of things. And I think that's where I even gain a little bit more knowledge, where I get to learn just a little bit more, right along with the audience as well, too. Because that's one thing about gardening. We might have as much experience in the world. Like you had Gardner Scott on. He's one of my good
Mhm.
friends. I really enjoy having him on our show. He's been on a couple of times already. In fact, he'll be on regular on our show now coming up this year, as he'll be joining with me on every second Sunday of the month to do just a live Q&A with me here on our on my channel. And that's one of the things, he'll even tell you, he's got way more experience, 40 some year, maybe even more. I can't even remember how much experience he's got, but it is multitudes of mine, and he'll tell you, there's always things to learn. He's always learning new things and that stuff. We never know everything there really is to know especially when it comes to gardening, with all of the different variables and things that go along with it. But that becomes that next extra added thing that we get from doing and hosting a podcast of our own, is learning a little bit more ourselves.
I definitely agree with that. Something I love when it comes to having co-hosts on the podcast show is able to learn more about what they do, what they like, the techniques they gravitate towards, the plants they gravitate towards. That's just the main reasoning why I created the Growing Generation podcast show, is to showcase other gardeners, and so other people or viewers who may have never heard of the person I'm showcasing will able to instantly on the live learn more about them. If they have any questions, they'll be able to answer them on live show. And so that's something I really, really like about podcasts, because not only are you learning information about the other gardener, if not,
Mhm.
your viewers are also learning something about the gardener. And so I also really like incorporating up and coming gardeners. um for example, I had Dominique from Farm Unique. I met her when she was at her first hundreds on TikTok. She got viral on TikTok for growing collard greens.
Nice.
And so she is a very successful gardener in Southern Florida right now. And so you're able to learn more about some of these co-hosts, what they do, what's better fit for them, especially here in Southern Florida. Like we are located about like an hour or three away from each other.
Yeah.
We're able to learn from each other. We may not have learned something that the other person has done. And so something I really like is following people who have years in this garden industry. Like one of them, Gardner Scott, like we mentioned.
Hmm.
He's an amazing avid gardener and he is in Colorado and he has many years under his belt doing what he loves most, gardening. And he documents it on his channel, the Gardner Scott channel. And so he also does a live show as well. And so it's really cool to see how, based on not only where you live, but how the gardener is, their gardening varies. And so I know there's some gardeners who like formal landscaping, they like straight lines, they like crisp edges. And there's gardeners like me who just does forestry. We don't really care about the straight lines or the pretties. We care about having a landscape that's useful, like fruits and veggies and root crops and anything like that. And so it
Hmm.
totally depends on to what you find the easiest, what you find more attracting in a way, and what you find yourself doing in the long run. Because even in the garden industry, there's so many branches like hydroponics, there's urban gardening, off-grid garden. There's so many things you could dive yourself into, and you don't want to fall into a pit and something you don't like doing. And
Yeah.
so something I always recommend to gardeners is first to find what they love most. Do they like pollinator gardens? Do they like growing their own food? Do they like raised bed gardening? And then start their venture from there.
Yeah.
Needless to say, you could always change up. When I started the Ultimate Gardening channel, it was purely ornamentals. That's the only thing I wanted to do. Ornamentals, formal, straight line. And then
Yep.
now you see that we're food forestry. It totally depends on how your vision for your garden changes. Because something I always say is a garden is never finished. It's
Mhm.
always going to be worked on if you like it or
Mhm.
not. It's a
That's right.
it's an evolving thing. And so it may look one way one time and then a few months later it may look different. And so it totally depends on time management, how much time you can invest, the passion you have for it, how much space as well. And so everything is up to the gardener. You
Yeah.
decide what you want your channel to be. And so that's what I absolutely love about the garden industry, because the connections, you're able to make connections with gardeners. And so one of the things I really would love to spread out there is this is for any industry. You get connections with other influencers. And so, what are some benefits that you have found of speaking with these other gardeners? What have you learned from them? What are some things you found more interesting about them? What are just some benefits in general you find of having these connections in the industry you're involved in?
Yeah, well, there's definitely a lot you get from being able to communicate with other people, especially other people who share the same passion as you do, who are out working in their gardens very similar as you do, and those sort of things, always, bring back sort of similar to what we touched on, is learning just maybe a little bit more about what what's in my garden, what am I able to do. I've come away from conversations, learning things and going right out into the garden and giving them a shot and trying stuff. um, One of the things you touched on there is that the gardening, really, there's very few black and white things in gardening. There's tons of variables. There's tons of way, which opens it up to all sorts of different methods and ways of gardening, like you're mentioning, whether it's raised bed gardening, your in-ground gardening, are you growing on a balcony? Is it, as far as like small spaced urban gardening, containers, all sorts of stuff that really uh, are available to people. So there's a lot of ways that a gardening can work into how you're able to understand it in a way. So you might, and again too, I've always said, and my biggest advice was just jump in, similar like you're saying. You kind of look at what you've got, study it out just a little bit, do a little bit of research on, light, watering, fertilization, these sort of basic little things, and then go to it, go at it. Whether you're going to dig up your backyard and create some rows, or you're going to put in some raised beds, throw containers out onto a patio similar to what I do, and all of that sort of stuff. So there's a lot we can work within, and then a lot of things we can learn and try. Some things that'll work for you that won't work for other people, all that sort of stuff. So coming back to some of those things that I get from other people that when I'm talking to them, is some of that knowledge, because I might learn something from someone doing something that I never thought of. And I've done a lot of stuff in gardening, and there's, again, coming back, I'm still learning things, and there's so much more still to learn. And that's really truly what I think that I get from these interactions and connections with all these different gardeners, especially too, as you're talking about, and you touched on also, is we're all from different areas and different places. Like, you're over there in Florida. I just can't even imagine what it's like to garden in Florida, because I've never been to Florida. I haven't been in that climate. I've never even planted anything, so I don't have a knowledge. So I get a little bit from you and learn just a little bit more, even though I'm not there and I can't garden, but I learn about Florida gardening, and I learn what those differences are from what I'm able to do in my own garden. Whether you're in Florida or you're all the way up in the north and, Wisconsin, and you're dealing with freezing temperatures far more than what I deal with. So then I get a chance to learn a little bit more. How do you extend a season? What are you doing in those sort of situations and that sort of stuff? So there's so much you can get by getting into these conversations with other people. And I think that's one of the things that we really truly do offer with a live stream podcast type situation, and bringing other guests and people on, is that we're able to give people a different perspective. We're able to show them something just a little bit different. Maybe, I mean, sometimes maybe that person's right in your area and they're going to give you just what you need for what you're doing right now, or you're going to learn something just a little bit different that you don't have a connection with. But we're all learning, and the more you learn about things, the better it is anyways, even if I can't do it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, especially when it comes to all the information that's drawn from, whether it be videos or live shows. I have received or learned so much new things when it comes to these shows, especially with connections. What I found most is not only have connections with other people in other areas, countries, states, have connections that are local to you. Because although you may have gardened for many years, there's something some gardeners in your local area may know about that you haven't heard of and that you may want to venture in later on. And so that's something I definitely would love to see more of. I haven't really gotten touch bases with anybody like really, really local to me here in Southern Florida. I know Dominique is a bit more up, almost close to Central Florida.
Yeah.
But I haven't very rarely seen any Southern Florida gardeners, which is hopefully on the rise soon.
Yeah.
But another really thing I love or venture in is young gardeners, because young gardeners are starting to have a spark of interest in gardening. And I know
Yeah.
that that's very, very cool, especially since when I started gardening, I was in middle school. And to see how other people are starting, or other young gardeners starting to venture into this realm, I am super excited. And I always offer as much support as I can, because this garden industry, or the garden industry in general, you'll see that there's no hate. Nobody's gonna
Yeah.
hate on another person. There's not gonna be any issues. Why?
Mhm.
Because we all support one each other. We all give each other not only information or advice or tips, but we also support each other in what we do, what content we
Yeah.
produce. And so there's this kid in New Zealand, is it? Or some, it's somewhere. I don't remember where. I
Mhm.
collabed with him last year, and he is 16 years old, or where when the same age as me, and his YouTube channel boosted up. He's well over 10,000 subscribers right now.
Oh, awesome.
And I think he has like not even 2 years on YouTube, and he was able to boost his audience up
Mhm.
that quick. And so it's totally finding what fits you the best in what area, and as well
Mhm.
as what you could give to your audience members. And so that's something I always love to say, is that in the garden industry, you'll always have support no matter what. If you need help from a gardener, they'll give it to you, whether it be information or, hey, what happens? Do I do to this plant? Or even some people will help you on your channel if you're starting a YouTube channel. People will shout you out. That's something I've realized. Like Gardner Scott, the urban gardener. We have Kate Cattrall, which was the very first gardener who shouted me out. You will have constant support from the industry, from the garden industry. You will
Yeah,
expect constant flow of support. And so it's really important that you're able to find what you love as well as the right connections as well. Because
yeah,
what I found the best is that I connect better with the people who does what I do best,
yeah,
food forestry. Yeah, I discuss with other people who do ornamentals, etc., but I have bigger connections with those who do what I love most, which is food forestry. And
yeah.
so it all narrows down to what you like best. That's really much it.
Yeah, yeah, and, the idea of you younger folks getting into the gardening world and starting to create and do things, I think is just really amazing. Now, there are certain, good percentages of each and every age group. But if you're gonna look at the younger folks, there that percentage is a lot larger, that there's a lot more people who are your age who are out there watching YouTube or, TikTok, Instagram, all of these different places. So having you younger folks out there promoting gardening and promoting the gardening industry, and especially touching on the fact that you mentioned one of the biggest and main things about the whole gardening community and industry is that it's like a big gardening family,
Yeah.
and not even a close family, not like a nitpicking family or anything like that, because there are those families too. But
Yes.
and I find I get into some of these other subcategories, like you go into the pepper community, or
Mm-hmm.
you go into, say, the giant community, growing giants and stuff. That's when you start seeing people who are just too competitive with each other. And when they start getting competitive, then that's when the nitpicking, and that's when all these sort of things start. And then for some reason, just in the gardening world, nobody wants to really compete. We're all just trying to share. We're all just trying to encourage each other, and to give each other, good information, and help each other get started. And that's what I've always found from the beginning. And when you can connect with younger folks in that same way, showing them the way into the gardening community, that this is the way it is. This is where you find friendly people who are always going to be, there to help give you some advice, or all that sort of stuff. That's really great. I remember when I first started in gardening too, one of the first people I watched was Luke from Mi Gardener. See,
Mhm.
now Luke was your age when I first started watching him, and he was out there doing that stuff, and he was a young folk doing and sharing gardening, and had a good sense of knowledge. And there's a lot we can learn from each other, whether I'm, got 13, 14 years of gardening, or Gardner Scott with, all of his years of gardening, or someone with just a couple of years who's learning. You can learn a lot from people who are learning. You know what I mean? You learn a
Yeah.
lot from people who are just getting things down, and they're doing that stuff. And I remember, there's tons of stuff that I still utilize, and knowledge I still have and carry with me, that I learned from Luke years ago, you know? And so I think that's really great when it comes down to it. And one of the main reasons why, when I found your channel this last year, I was like, I've got to have this kid on my show. I've got to show people that young people can be just as passionate about all of this sort of stuff, and carry the message of a good, strong gardening community for us too.
I definitely agree with this. We're just a big happy family. We don't like competition in general,
Yeah.
unless you're into that type of thing and you like to have competition. However, that's something you won't see in the garden
Hmm.
industry, because we are just supportive of each other. We don't
Yeah.
really care what the other content is. We just love to support other people. For
Yeah.
example, one of the gardeners watching us today is Amir's allotment. He's a gardener along with Danny over at the Grow Up channel. He was on our show. He was on our show about 2 weeks ago, I
Yeah.
believe. And he's a very passionate, avid gardener. And he's also starting on YouTube, and he's doing an amazing job at it. And so
Yes.
it's totally like a big happy family that we're
Mhm.
open with welcome arms. You won't expect negativity. You will only expect support and useful information from this industry, which is what I love most and makes me want to stay in this industry and not go off to another one. And so
Yeah.
that's definitely something I really, really enjoy when it comes to the garden industry because it's fun. You're able to be creative. You meet great people. You're able to venture off in new experiments. For example, me there I opened up a page on Instagram called Permaculture Studies because we are the nursery I my nursery in Parkland. We are opening up a research center over there. We're having a research center over there because we're wanting to open up experiments. We're wanting to learn more about species, create new species that are Florida friendly. And so it's totally up to what you love the best and what you want to do and what you
Mhm.
want to be known for, because
Mhm.
that's what is known about. Because like Epic Gardening, known for growing his own food, and my gardener for having his huge seed company,
Yeah.
the Grow Up channel with Danny for his live streams, me for food forestry, Urban Gardener
Yeah.
for container gardening. There's just so many things you could be known for. It's just you have to find your right spot, and
Mhm.
so that's definitely what I have to
Or
agree
in
with.
some cases, you might be lucky and that right spot
Mhm.
finds you. And that's
Yeah,
kinda how my case happened. It found me. I mean, that cucumber found me, my
yeah.
gardens found me, and I was so lucky that that happened. So if you are lucky, that happens as well too.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's totally up to what you love as well as what you're able to provide.
Yeah.
So that is the ending of the episode 6 here on the Growing Generations podcast. And today's topic was gardening on YouTube. So if you're wanting to start a garden journey on YouTube, go for it. I would always
Yes.
recommend it.
Do it.
It's fun. You're able to venture out, experiment, and you'll definitely see the constant support from this industry. So, once again, a huge shout out to Enoch for joining with us on this episode. It was a great pleasure having you on this episode, and we will definitely have you on again in a future episode. Make sure to not forget to join him on his show that has started up again for 2024. Make sure to go support him at the Let's Get Growing show over there on his channel, The Urban
Yeah.
Garden. All the information you need is on the description. So make sure you go check him out and give him all the support as well as the support to his co-host as well.
Yeah, and look forward to having you back on too sometime this year as well. So definitely come join us Saturdays, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, right on my channel, The Urban Gardener.
Exactly. Make sure to go ahead and tune us over here at Growing Generation Podcast every Tuesday at 5 o'clock p.m. Maybe it'll be 4 or 5, depending on the time schedule we and the co-host have. So thank you all so much for joining with us on this episode, and we will see you guys next time. And never forget, we are growing generations by generations. Bye, everyone.